hopefully. So I am Helen Leach and I'm the manager of the SENDIAS service, and we have on the team this morning Emily Spraggett, who's also the development officer, and we're here to give you some information around SENDIAS and what support we can offer you as parents and carers. So Somerset SENDIAS is a special educational needs, disability and information service, specifically for children, young people, parents and carers from the age of 0 to 25. And in Somerset, we provide that service. So what we do as a service, we provide information, advice and support about special educational needs and disability for matters around SEND. And it is a statutory service, it's free, it's confidential and impartial, which is really important for parents to understand that. We encourage working with schools, educational settings, that could be preschools, it could be colleges, it could be independent settings, and the local authority, and any other services that may be helping to support parents and carers with children with SEND and around the decisions that those families have to make. It might be useful to know that it is a statutory service because local authorities must arrange for children and families to have that information by law around information about SEND for their children, especially regarding to education, health and care, and it is outlined in the Code of Practice. So this is about how to meet the team, the SENDIAS team. So in SENDIAS we have 4 SENDIAS officers, previously known as area coordinators. They cover Sedgemoor and Mendip, South Somerset, Taunton and West Somerset. Those officers provide support and information around the education, health and care plan process, annual reviews, mediations, and also going through the SENDIAS tribunal process. We have a young children and persons officer. Currently we have a vacancy for that post. Their role is specifically to gain the views of children and young people to inform part of the education and healthcare plan process, annual reviews, mediation, and also tribunals, and with a view to keeping an eye on what's happening post 16. So it's really important that young people have their views supported in those processes and that their voices are heard with what they feel that their aspirations and wants are as the future carries on for their development of their lives. We also have a development officer, Emily. Her role is county-wide and it's supporting the development of the service with regards to the website, with regards to training, preparing leaflets, and she also attends some strategic meetings on behalf of myself when I'm unavailable to do so. So she's got quite a wide-ranging role, and as I say, she covers the county. We also have 5 SEND support workers. They cover Sedgemoor, Taunton and West Somerset, the Mendip area and also South Somerset. Their role is to help parents and carers, particularly in schools, with issues around SEND, for those children who are on SEND support. So those children who are struggling in school, they may have an identified SEND need, they may not have an identified SEND need. So the SEND support workers can help support parents and carers to prepare for and attend meetings with schools or educational settings to try and provide the right support at SEND support level and work together around the graduated response. So their role is very specific to working in schools with parents and carers and around getting that right level of support in place for their children. We also, the SENDIAS officers in particular, their role is to provide a range of information, advice and support about the educational health and care plan process through the annual review process, and support with preparing for mediations and tribunals, which forms quite a lot of their work at the moment. They can also support parents and carers and young people with information around transport issues. As we know, Somerset's a rural county and transporting your child to school or a post-16 provision can be quite tricky and difficult to navigate, so we can help support those parents who may have any issues with transport for their children with SEND. And we also support with the SENDIAS officer's role around exclusions in schools as well. The SENDIAS SEND support workers, as I previously mentioned, They support parents to have an understanding of the legal processes involved in that role, such as the assess, plan, do, review process and what happens with that and how that can help their child. The graduated respond and how to understand that and knowing what to do and when. They will help support parents to make decisions by talking through their options. They don't advise them what to do, but they will give them their options and help them to understand what they can make the decisions around their children. They will also help parents and carers to understand how to deal with conflict, particularly with relationships with possible professionals or schools when things have gone wrong, to help try and find a way forward to understand different points of view and how to work together to improve that support for their children. They also hope that their parents will feel supported and listened to as part of their process and their support. And as part of that, the SEND support workers will, of course, signpost families to other services that they may find helpful. That could be CAOP, that could be occupational therapy. They will signpost them and give them those support with that information. As part of their role, they will also help parents prepare and attend for school meetings. And that would be for those parents who really struggle with perhaps might have literacy problems or find it difficult to understand complex situations and processes. So they can help a parent do that, prepare for and attend a meeting. And they will also support children and young people and parents through those children who are at risk of exclusion or who may be on fixed term exclusions, or maybe potentially sometimes those exclusions where the children are sent home frequently from school, so they can help support with conversations around that area. So SEND support, if a child has SEND support, schools and colleges must follow that. It is in the code of practice. Schools and colleges, and particularly schools, should be using the assess, plan, do, review cycle, and at least it's expected that they would do 2 rounds of that before going any further with requesting an assessment. Schools should be working on the young people's outcomes and working together. They'll agree the next steps of what support they need to achieve this, and that parents should be involved in that process to look at outcomes for their children in school. The school should be meeting with the young person 3 times a year. I'm sure that your experiences may be slightly different to that, but that's what they should be doing. And also they should also be completing a SEND support review for those children who are on SEND support. So those are the things that they should be doing. They need to be taking into account the wishes and views of the children themselves as well to inform that part of the process. It should be broken down into manageable steps depending on the child's level of need and understanding, and usually most children have an idea of something they want to do as they grow up, and it may not be what they actually end up doing, but they've usually got some idea of what they'd like to do, and it's important that that is as part of the process to enable them to achieve what they would like to achieve later on. And if the child or young person has identified SEN, then they may have some additional funding. And if there isn't enough and the funding in place and the child needs an education, health and care plan, then this can be applied for through the local authority. There are conversations that can be held with schools and the local authority to look at how best to fund the child's provision. And part of this process of the education, health and care plan process is that there needs to be evidence to be collated up together to provide that information to make those decisions. As part of the SENDIAS service, we have a service alongside that you may or may not be aware of, and that is a choice advice service. And the choice advice service is another free service. It provides impartial advice and support for parents and carers through the school admissions and appeals process. And that is about for those children who may not get their first preference or second preference. It may be an in-year application where a child's been refused to place at a school, and that service can provide support through those processes. So they can help parents and carers understand how the admissions process works and how the school appeals process works, which is quite a complicated. It's different to the SEND process for the education, health and care plans. They also can give information around how the oversubscription criteria works for all the different schools, because lots of schools have different oversubscription criteria, and that can be quite difficult to navigate. They can explain to a parent and carer the rulings around infant class size, and I know around Somerset there are a lot of primary schools that have infant class size as part of their school set up for school admissions, and so that could be really complicated to explain and to navigate as well. They can provide practical support either by email, telephone calls or face-to-face, and hopefully now that things are levelling up within the COVID situation that we'll be back out and about to see parents. They can also provide information on school transport, again because there's also transport issues for children with SEND and those who don't have SEND, so we can provide information around school transport for children too. So what can the Choice Advisor offer? It's impartial information about schools and academy. They wouldn't recommend a school, but they would give a parent all the information they need about those schools that may be in their area, and the information around SEND, for example, of the children that may have SEND in that school and the provision that that school offers. So they can give parents and carers information in that respect. They can help and offer to help with completing an application form. Schools do have different application forms depending on which academy trust they belong to or whether they're a local authority mainstream school, so they can give information and advice around how to fill an application form. They can also advise on how to prepare for an admission or a transport appeal, and sometimes they can attend school hearings as well with that parent depending on the level of that parent's needs and understanding. So that's a short trip around the Choice Advice Service. Annual reviews. A lot of parents will be familiar with this process. Annual reviews are annually if your child has an education, health and care plan, and from year 9 it should include information about preparing for adulthood and post-16 options. The earlier parents and young people start thinking about post-16, the better for that young person to get the provision in place for when they transition into post-16. Schools, young people and their parents form part of the annual review process. It is a process that involves everyone. We have discovered in our service supporting post-16 young people and children and young people in year 11, there seems to be quite a lot of lack of information around preparing for adulthood and choices around education beyond year 11. And as a service, we are trying to collate a lot more information and putting it on our website to help parents and carers understand what's available post-16 rather than the usual guidance towards colleges and apprenticeships. And there is a lot more information out there than I think parents are aware. The information collected at and during the annual review will be submitted to the local authority so that the education, health and care plan can reflect the current needs and outcomes. That has to be, it is a statutory process, the annual review, so there are timelines and deadlines that need to be followed. As part of the annual review as well, a change of placement can also be discussed and be put forward for the local authority's consideration. Consent for young people post-16. We do find that it's quite confusing, the legislation around consent for young people post-16, but once a young person gets to 16, and usually according to law, it is the last Friday in June after they are 16, they then have full consent. And under the Children and Families Act in 2014, young people will have more say about their education and their parents and carers will have less. And that sometimes can prove difficult for young people and for parents. It's a difficult, challenging time for parents and carers and young people to recognise that young people do have consent. And sometimes young people will have consent and not the parents, and that's another thing I think that's not quite so well known about. Parents and carers can still be involved to support their children and young people making decisions or acting on their behalf if the young person agrees to it, and that's where sometimes there can be a challenge and a difficult conversation. Young people can also nominate a friend if they wanted to, a professional or an advocate to support them instead of a parent carer if that's what they wish to do so, and if they wish that to happen, that's their right to do so. And just to touch on a mention of the Mental Capacity Act when it comes to regarding consent, that a person, according to the Act, must be assumed to have the capacity unless there's evidence that they are not able to make the relevant decision. And part of the Mental Capacity Act is that that decision is based on each individual question. It's quite complicated, but it does, it really is about each individual decision, not a capacity as a whole. And that's something perhaps we could look at having a webinar about later on, together with a Parent Care Forum. So the parental and young people's expectations. Sometimes it can be very difficult and limited out there to find what is available, and we have found in our experience supporting young people that as I touched on earlier, it's generally young people are generally guided towards college and apprenticeships. And some young people go on to do apprenticeships through college and are very successful at achieving this. But however, these aren't the only options available to young people, and there's a lot more information out there now than there used to be. And that is both for children with SEND and who have an education, health and care plan, and also for those with education, health and care plans. They all have additional challenges. They're all individual, and they will all have different wants and desires as to what sort of future they would like to do, what they would like to achieve. And so it's really about listening to those young people and finding out what they really want to do, and then finding out what services out there or provision can help that young person achieve their aspirations for adulthood. So what's available for young people post 16? There are various options for those young people who don't want to go to college. Somerset Skills and Learning have got a really wide variety of subjects available, and they involve small class sizes. So for those children or young people who find it difficult to socialise with big groups and who've had small class sizes in schools, they've got some really good sort of resources and training and courses available for young people, and it's worth having a look on their website. There's a whole host of apprenticeships out there now compared to what there was a couple of years ago, and that's a really interesting way for some young people to achieve their aspirations as they go into adulthood. There are also supported apprenticeships now, and those are targeted more so at children and young people with an education, health and care plan, and a lot of information around that can be found on the Preparing for Adulthood website. And there's some national guidance, I think, that's been released today around supported internships as well. So that's just came out this morning, I think it was yesterday or today, around supported guidance for internships should a young person wish to go down the internship route. Somerset Works, some of you may have heard of that. They provide one-to-one support and put together a package that is individualised to that young person's needs, and it very much around their needs and what they're looking to achieve. And so Somerset Works is working really well with a lot of young people, and it's a very bespoke particular package for that young person and to meet their needs. There are also job coaches available for young people if young people want to go into employment particularly, and some young people would like to do employment. And the two of the local people or firms within Somerset are Abbury and Discovery. They can provide job coaches who have coordinators to help young people post 16, and they're putting on some really exciting work now for young people who actually want to go into employment, and will provide job coaches to support those young people as they start employment right through the whole process. The Job Centre is a fantastic resource for young people with different ideas who want to go into employment. They have specific staff members who support young people with SEND and who may have education, health and care plans. They have a lot of support to provide that young person's individual needs, and work really hard with employers to make sure that those young people are supported in employment. And they put on a lot of training courses for young people, and there's a lot of skilled staff there that support young people with special educational needs as well. So the Job Centre is also a really good place to look for alternative things should young people decide they'd like to go into employment. And some of the young people have been really successful at that, achieving that as well. So that's another option, and a lot of people are not aware of what the job centre can provide in terms of support for young people into entry into the workplace. So transport post 16, this can be a very difficult area. There is no automatic right to transport to get them to an educational setting, and a lot of parents and young people may not be aware of this. There's a big gap between 16 and 19 with regards to transport, and that can be very difficult, particularly in a county like Somerset, where it's so rural and a lot of people, there's not a lot of bus routes and things like that, so transport can be a massive issue. The local authority, though, do have a discretion to assist with transport, and are expected by the Department of Education to target and support young people who need transport, particularly those with SEND, to access their establishment where they will be attending. So there is a discretion, and there is a way of the local authority being able to help and support some of those young people with SEND. Again, it's very much on an individualised basis. Also, what's not known and can be a bit of a shock is that when young people turn 16, they will have to make a contribution towards their transport. And in Somerset, if they were to get a bus ticket to get to college, for example, then that is or was around £810 a year. Although that, I don't know what this next year's is going to be at the moment. I don't think the local authority have confirmed that. Young people can get a bursary and can apply for a bursary towards transport costs at their educational setting. That's, if they were going to college, or whether they were going to an independent college as placement. Parents and carers can apply for, and a young person can apply for, a bursary to assist with the transport costs. If a parent, a carer and young person apply for transport and they're refused through the local authority, parents and young people do have the right to apply for an appeal to look at their transport request again. And so SENDIAS can help support parents and carers through that process of appealing against the local authority's decision not to support with transport. Something that the Somerset County Council are keen to promote is travel training, and that is providing a bus buddy for somebody to help learn how to use a bus to get to their educational placement. And so bus buddy and travel training they're promoting that at the moment. So that might be something that your young person might like to try, and have somebody help them navigate how to get on a bus, pay for tickets, and get to your establishment and then come back again. So that's something that some parents and young people might be interested in, is travel training. So for young people at age between 19 and 25, access to further education, such as college and traineeships and supported internships, then an education, health and care plan is required. And there are times when people post 16 do apply for an education, health and care plan to support them with what they would like to access when they are over 19. This is so that the college can get funding to support that young person. It's a different funding stream once they leave school through colleges and other apprenticeship providers to gain access to funding, so it's slightly differently set up. The young person would be really clear as to why they want to go on and develop, so that when they submit a plan, they've got that plan in place, all the evidence that they need. And then that, again, once they have been successful in getting an education healthcare plan to access that further education, then that would also, alongside the process, be receiving an annual review, and it will be reviewed on an annual basis and looked at as to whether that young person may or may not need an additional year to complete that course, and it may be that they are ready to move on to a following course or look at the next steps, because it's slightly different. It will be annually looked at depending on the course that that young person is doing. If a young person leaves education or training and goes into workplace, then the education, health and care plan would be ceased. Would be ceased at that point. The system of support for SEND places particularly particular importance on helping children and young people prepare their future, and this is referred to the code of practice as preparing for adulthood. There's a lot more focus on preparing for adulthood now for young people going forward, and which is a good thing, because it you know, that leads to have meet that young person's need as they go into adulthood. So as you're aware, there is a local offer and other websites. All local authorities have to have a local offer, and other websites also that we have, that we've got on our website that you can signpost parents to for information around post-16 is Contact Beyond 16, and most of you have probably heard of from Contact. Preparing for Adulthood is an excellent website with all sorts of different information, not just around the education, health and care plan process for post-16, but also housing, independent living, and all wide range of other issues for young people preparing for adulthood. And these are our contact details if anybody would like to contact us after this event. Thank you for listening.